Notes from Underground by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Chapter 2. I want to tell you, gentlemen, whether you wish to hear it or not, why I was unable to become even so much as an insect. I'll tell you solemnly that I have often wanted to become an insect, but even that wasn't granted to me. I swear to you, sirs, that excessive consciousness is a disease, a genuine, absolute disease. For everyday human existence, it would more than suffice to have the ordinary share of human consciousness. That is to say, 1/2, 1/4 of that which falls to the lot of a cultivated man in our wretched 19th century. A man who has, moreover, the particular misfortune of living in Petersburg, this most abstract and intentional city on earth. Cities, you know, may be intentional or unintentional. It would, for instance, be quite enough to have the amount of consciousness by which all the so-called simple, direct people and men of action live. I'll wager that you think I'm writing all of this merely out of bravado and bad taste at that, clattering my sword like that officer, just to exercise my wit at the expense of men of action. But, my dear sirs, who would take pride in his own diseases, and brag about them too? What am I saying? Everybody does it. It's precisely their diseases that people pride themselves on, and I do, perhaps more than anyone else. Let's not argue. My objection was absurd. But that aside, I'm firmly convinced that not only excess of consciousness, but any consciousness at all is a disease. I stand on that. However, let us leave this for a moment too. Tell me now, why has it always been as though in spite that at the moments when I'm most capable of feeling all the refinements of that lofty and beautiful, as they used to say among us once upon a time, yes, at those very moments no, not felt, but perpetrated such unseemly acts, such acts as, well, in a word, such acts are perhaps committed by everyone, but in which, in my case, occurred as if on purpose, just when I was most keenly aware that they should never occur at all. The more aware I was of goodness and of everything lofty and beautiful, the deeper I sank into my slime, and the more likely I was to get mired down in it altogether. But the main point is that all of this seemed to take place within me not by chance, but as though it had to be so, as though this were my most normal condition rather than a disease or a corruption, so that in the end, I even lost the will to fight this corruption. In the end, I almost came to believe, or perhaps I really did come to believe, that this was indeed my normal condition. And yet at first, in the beginning, how much torment I endured in this struggle. I did not think that this happened with others as well, and therefore kept it to myself all through my life as a deep secret. I was ashamed. Perhaps I am still ashamed even now. I reached a point where, trudging back to my corner on some foul Petersburg night, I would feel a certain hidden, morbid, nasty little pleasure in the acute awareness that I had once again committed something vile that day, that what had been done could no longer be undone, and I would gnaw and gnaw at myself in the silence, tearing and nagging at myself until the bitterness would finally begin to turn into a kind of shameful, damnable sweetness, and in the end, into a definite, positive pleasure. Yes, a pleasure. I stand by that. The very reason why I brought it up is that I've always wanted to find out, do other people experience such pleasures? I will explain it to you. This pleasure comes precisely from the sharpest awareness of your own degradation, from the knowledge that you've gone to the utmost limit, that it is despicable yet cannot be otherwise, that you no longer have any way out, that you will never become a different man, that even if there were still time and faith enough to change yourself, you probably would not even wish to change. And if you wished, you would do nothing about it anyway, because, in fact, there is perhaps nothing to change too. And the chief and final point is that all of this proceeds from the normal and fundamental laws of an excessive consciousness, and from the inertia which is the direct outcome of these laws. Hence you not only will not change yourself, but simply cannot do a thing about it in any case. And so, in consequence of over-acute consciousness, you think, that's right, you are a scoundrel. As if it were a consolation to the scoundrel to know that he is indeed a scoundrel. But enough of that. All this twaddle, and what did I explain? What is the explanation for that pleasure? But I will explain it. I will get to the very core of it. That's what I took up the pen for. For instance, I have a terribly sensitive ego. I am as touchy and as easily offended as a hunchback or a midget, and yet there have been moments when, if someone had slapped my face, I might have welcomed even that. I mean it. I would probably have managed to seek out a kind of pleasure even in that. Naturally, it would be the pleasure of despair, but then it's in despair that you find the sharpest pleasures, particularly when you are most acutely aware of the hopelessness of your position. And if you're slapped, why, that's when you'll really be crushed by the awareness of what muck you've been reduced to. And the main thing is that, look at it as you will, it still comes out that the fault was always yours to start with. The worst of it, though, is that you are at fault through no fault of your own, just, so to speak, by natural law. Because, first of all, I am at fault for being more intelligent than anyone around me. I've always considered myself more intelligent than anyone around me, and, would you believe me, I've sometimes even felt embarrassed by it. At any rate, I've always somehow looked sideways and could never look people straight in the eye. And I'm at fault because, even if I were magnanimous, I merely would have suffered all the more from the realization of the utter uselessness of my magnanimity. For I would surely never have been able to do anything with it, neither forgive, because the man who slapped me had perhaps been prompted to it by the laws of nature, and the laws of nature are not subject to forgiveness, nor forget, for, although it's a matter of natural law, it still rankles. And finally, even if I had wanted to be altogether ungenerous, if I had wanted to revenge myself upon the man who had insulted me, I wouldn't have been able to take revenge on anyone, since I would surely never have brought myself to do anything even if I could. Why not? That is something I want to say a few words about separately.